My Lords, we are committed to the implementation and the integrity of our democracy, but we cannot be complacent. It is a collective endeavour to protect it against threats to ensure it remains robust. The Online Safety Act creates a new regulatory regime for online platforms and search services with new duties to act to protect UK users from harm in both the design and the operation of their services. These duties apply to overseas services with links to the UK and includes offending relating to public order and terrorism from illegal foreign interference that undermines our democratic politics.
I am grateful, my Lords, to my noble friend the Minister for that answer, not least on her birthday. I wonder if she'll agree with me, to reflect the previous question, that free speech is given constitutional protection in this country and elsewhere in the Council of Europe by Article 10 of the Convention on Human Rights. But even in the US, famously the land of the First Amendment, free speech does not extend to, for example, the malicious and deliberate spreading of incendiary libels and inciting public disorder.
My Lords, I think free speech is absolutely crucial, but it brings with it responsibility. And I think all of us would say that whilst people have no right not to be offended, it is important that any comments made, whether on social media or in any other form of media, are factual, they're accurate, and they're well informed. And one of the things that really does strike me is that on issues that are contentious, we should perhaps lower the temperature and not the tone.
The Leader of the House may be aware that in the latest incident, Elon Musk has responded to Ed David's criticism in language which Tommy Robinson might well use, but Nigel Farage, which I'm sure, disapprove of. The importance of having a sense of commonality in the public debate, a public broadcasting network on which there can be a national conversation, becomes all the more important when we have misinformation being put into this country by social media outfits abroad. Can the Leader of the House assure us that the government will do its best to defend and promote the BBC, which all public opinion polls show is the most trusted source of news for the largest proportion of our population?
My Lords, I am a great defender of the BBC, not least for the fantastic production of Wolf Hall, but in terms of, and if we look back through history, we'll find time and time again when misinformation has caused enormous chaos. But I think it's really important that we, all of us, see it as a collective responsibility for truth, for accuracy, for decency, and for debate to be conducted in a way that is conducive to providing information and I think helping people understand the issues. And I think, can I repeat, we should lower the temperature on contentious issues. It seems to me sometimes some people are too interested in lowering the tone of the debate and not the temperature.
My Lords.
Leader of the House, whether the government's looking at whether it's necessary to strengthen the Online Safety Act.
Well, my Lords, I think the first point is to ensure that we bring the Online Safety Act into force in full. And that is the foundation on which we can build. But it is fairly new legislation that the last government brought in, and we supported that. And I hope that it does help and shows those providers the responsibilities they have to ensure there is a proper debate with good, accurate information. Because disinformation isn't a new issue, but it is a very serious issue. And today, information can travel around the world far faster than it ever has before. So let's see how the Online Safety Act works, make sure that works, and use that as a foundation to build on.
My Lords, would my noble friend, the leader, has she seen that just in the last couple of hours, there's been a report from the United States that the founder of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, has announced his intention to reduce fact-checking on his platforms and to move the way in which those platforms operate closer to the way that X, formerly known as Twitter, now operates. And I think most people in this House know what that means. Would she agree with me that in those circumstances, it's even more important than it has ever been for safeguarding within our own national environment to be as strong as it can possibly be?
That's it.
Yeah, the Noble Lady makes an important point about fact-checking, and I think all platforms want to ensure their information is accurate as possible. In fact, the Meta decision does not apply to this country. It only applies to the US, and they're not removing fact-checking in Europe, which will remain.
Does my Lords, does the Leader of the House not think it's time that we looked at the rules regarding foreign contributions to political parties, albeit through domestic companies which they may own, and that we should also perhaps tell our nearest and dearest ally, the Americans, that just as we supported them in their resentment for Russian interference in their elections, so also we should expect American citizens not to interfere in our political process.
I think the Noble Lord makes a really important point about foreign interference, whether financial or otherwise, in other countries' democracy. And I think all of us in this country value our democracy, want it to remain robust. And I think the issue of ensuring that donations to political parties aren't just legal under the current rules, but are the rules fit for purpose, is the one that we should take very seriously.
I wonder whether the Noble Lady, the leader, would agree that while speech, free speech can be extremely offensive at times, that the dividing line is the context in which it occurs, and that the rules that govern hate speech in this country, and indeed criminalisation of speech, must always take into account the context, because it is the context that determines whether or not that speech is going to have further very undesirable outcomes.
I think if a matter appears before the courts regarding hate speech, that would be taken into account. The context is very important. And we have to remember, when we should choose our words carefully when we speak, whether it's in public or online. You know, the days when you had a conversation in the pub and went home and everyone had forgotten about it are gone. Now it seems that everything's recorded and amplified at speed around the world. And there are people that are vulnerable. There are people that have malign intent. And I have to say, these things happen in real time, and people can face real dangers from people not choosing their words carefully.
Does the government agree that widespread online media literacy is by far the best defence against mis- and disinformation online, and that consequently the more resilient we become to these harms, the less our need to restrict freedom of expression online? And if so, could the Minister perhaps briefly summarise the government's planned approach to driving up online media literacy?
I'm not sure I really understand the Noble Lord's point. To be media literate or social media literate doesn't stop somebody making comments that are inaccurate or offensive. I think the key issue is that we should not say that different rules apply to people on social media. I think we should look for public discourse, which is the responsibility of all of us, is at all times courteous, factual, and conduct debate in a proper way. That's not to say that people can't disagree or debate or even be offensive. What we can't do is have this almost as incitement and not worry about what is the truth and what is accurate if it gets a reaction. And I think sometimes there's too much being said in social media that's designed to get a reaction rather than to actually help inform people.
The victims of many of the actions that have led to this tsunami of bad words, they are being re-victimised by the sort of language and the way people are talking. I work with many of them. I work with the small women's groups, particularly in the north, around Doncaster, around Rotherham, Newcastle, where they are working still with victims who've been abused and violently treated. Is it not time that all of us said our main concern has to be them, And our main concern for them has to be working to make sure that social media is not a means of abusing and exploiting vulnerable women.
My lords, I think the noble lady makes a very profound, wise and appropriate point. A lot of the current issues around social media have arisen on child sexual abuse, and there could be no crime more vile or abhorrent than that. And I think if we use that for political purposes or somehow want to sort of stir it up, I come back to the very point I made at the beginning, that there is the thing about we must lower the temperature of debate and not the tone, and actually not try to seek to use such abhorrent crimes for political purposes, but at all times try to have a debate that moves the issue in a positive way and seeks to protect those who are vulnerable.